Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the biggest, oldest questions humanity has ever asked. Where in the world did all this come from? For thousands of years, the greatest minds have tried to sketch out the blueprint of reality itself, and today we're going to trace their incredible answers. So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll frame the big question itself. Then, we'll journey through Western philosophy and Islamic thought to see how they answered it. After that, we'll compare the main models that came out of all this. And finally, we'll see why any of this still matters today. All right, let's get into it. You know, the very first quest for philosophers and theologians wasn't just about what the universe is, but something deeper. They wanted to understand the whole shebang, the alam, as it's called, its source, what gives it order, and where it's all headed. At the heart of it all was this question. Early thinkers were basically cosmic detectives, hunting for a single, fundamental ingredient. The Greeks called it the arche. Was there some master substance, some single line of code that everything else was built from? This one question, right here, is the launchpad for centuries of debate. Okay, let's start with our first set of blueprints, kicking things off with the ancient Greeks. You're about to see a really fascinating evolution of thought, one that starts with very physical, tangible ideas and ends up in a place you might not expect: the human mind itself. So just look at this journey. It all starts with the early Greeks trying to pin down a physical source for everything. You know, water, air, fire. Then Plato comes along and says, wait, maybe it's not a substance, but an architect, a divine craftsman shaping stuff that was already there. Aristotle builds on that, talking about a prime mover that gives shape to raw potential. Then Plotinus introduces this wild idea of emanation, where reality just flows out from a single source. Fast forward a bunch, and Descartes pictures this clockwork, mechanical universe. And then, for the grand finale, the German idealists completely flip the script and argue that the blueprint isn't out there at all. It's in here, in our own minds. What a ride! Let's dig into Plato's idea a bit more. For him, creation wasn't about pulling a rabbit out of an empty hat. It was much more like cosmic architecture. He pictured this divine craftsman, the demiurge, who found a messy, chaotic jumble of pre-existing matter. Using a perfect set of blueprints, these eternal ideas, he then skillfully imposed order, purpose, and beauty onto that chaos. Now, Aristotle, who was Plato's student, took this and ran with it. He gave us this concept of Heil. It's crucial to get this. Heil isn't physical stuff like cosmic clay. It's a much cooler, more abstract idea. It's pure potential. It's the universe's raw, untapped ability to become anything. It just sits there, waiting, until a form comes along and gives it an actual identity, turning potential into reality. Okay, let's jump way forward in time, because this line of thinking eventually leads to some really mind-bending places. Take the idealist philosopher George Berkeley. His famous line, "to be is to be perceived," is about as radical as it gets. He's basically asking, if a tree falls in the forest and no mind is there to perceive it, does it even exist? For Berkeley, reality is fundamentally a mental construct. And this all culminates with the brilliant Immanuel Kant, who caused what's called a Copernican revolution in philosophy. He completely flipped the old model on its head. For centuries, everyone assumed our minds just passively receive information from the world. Kant said, no way. He argued that the world as we know it actually conforms to the structure of our minds. Things like space, time, cause and effect, they aren't out there. They're the organizing principles, the software our brain uses to make sense of everything. The blueprint for reality literally moved from the cosmos into our heads. Now, let's shift gears and turn to the incredibly rich answers that came out of Islamic intellectual traditions. Thinkers in this tradition were grappling with the exact same questions, but they brought powerful new theological and philosophical tools to the conversation, leading to some really distinct models of creation. For many Islamic theologians, especially the Kalam scholars, the starting point was an idea called creation ex nihilo. This literally means creation from nothing. The idea is that before the universe existed, there was, well, nothing. No chaos, no pre-existing matter, just a total and absolute void. And then, through a pure, powerful act of divine will, God brings everything we know into existence. But that wasn't the only game in town. While the theologians were focused on this singular, powerful act of will, other thinkers, like the Islamic philosophers, the Falasifa, and the mystics, or Sufis, saw things differently. For them, creation wasn't a one-time event that happened in the past. It was more like an eternal, necessary overflow from God's own being. The great Sufi mystic Ibn Arabi gave us one of the most beautiful and profound visions of all. He said creation wasn't about power, it was about love. He used this amazing metaphor of a hidden treasure that longed to be known. So God creates the universe as a sort of mirror, a place where his own divine beauty and attributes can be reflected and witnessed. It's an act of self-revelation. And Ibn Arabi maps out how this happens. It starts with the divine will. Then comes the famous creative command, be. But here's the cool part. That command isn't just spoken into an empty void. It's spoken to all the latent potentials that already exist within God's eternal knowledge. And those potentials, they hear the command and are brought from mere possibility into actual existence. It's less of a command and more of a divine dialogue. The Islamic philosophers, folks like Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina, came up with a totally different model called sudur, or emanation. To get this, just think about the sun. The sun doesn't wake up in the morning and decide to shine. It shines because that's its nature. It's a necessary overflow of its being. And that's how they saw creation, a continuous, logical, necessary overflowing of existence from God, the first cause. This process results in a beautifully ordered, intelligent cosmos. It's like a cosmic chain reaction. It starts with God, whose self-contemplation generates a first intellect. This intellect then thinks about God, generating a second intellect, and thinks about itself, generating the first heavenly sphere. This cascade of thought and being continues down the line until it gets to the level that governs our world. It's an elegant, logical, and hierarchical system. All right, so we've looked at a bunch of different ideas. Let's pull back for a second and put the fundamental blueprints side by side so we can really see how they stack up. The idea of shaping, the idea of creating from nothing, and the idea of emanation. This table really nails the core differences, doesn't it? Just look down the columns. What was there before creation? What is God's role in the process? And what is the nature of the act itself? Each model gives us a profoundly different answer. Is God a cosmic artist working with existing material? A sovereign king creating his realm from scratch? Or an eternal sun whose light can't help but spill out into a universe? So the big question, why does any of this matter now? It's so easy to just write these off as abstract, dusty old debates. But the truth is, these ancient and medieval ideas are like the invisible operating system running in the background of our modern world. They shape how we think about everything. Seriously, every time we talk about the universe as a finely tuned machine or debate whether there's a purpose to it all, we're echoing these old conversations. Do we see the universe as a product of choice, something that could have been different, or as the result of a necessary, logical process that had to be this way? The source code for those arguments was written centuries ago by the thinkers we've just talked about. So I'll leave you with this to think about. When you look at the universe through our modern, scientific eyes, which of these ancient blueprints feels the most familiar? Do you see a crafted artifact, a kingdom brought into being by a command, or a logical system unfolding out of necessity? And more importantly, by leaning toward one of these views, what might we have gained, and what might we have lost along the way?